The U.S. Senate unanimously condemned China yesterday over the spy balloon down nearly 2 weeks ago now after it flew from China across the continental U.S. Republicans, including Florida Senator Marco Rubio, have strongly criticized President Biden's response to the balloon, the first of 4 flying objects shot down this month. 4. Senator Rubio is a top-ranking Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee and a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and we're happy to say he's joining us this morning. Senator, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I know you've had several briefings about this matter in the last couple of days. What can you share with us about what you've learned, and how concerned should the American people be? First, share with us what you've learned.
Yeah, I think it's important to separate 2 different and distinct incidents, or 2 different types of incident. The first is the balloon. Everybody saw it. We knew what it was. We've seen them before. The U.S. knew it was coming. It knew it was headed here. It knew at least the day before it entered U.S. airspace what it was going to be doing, and had the opportunity to shoot it down. Did not. It entered the U.S. through Idaho, traveled through the middle of the country, over some very sensitive and important military installations, some of the most important we have in the country, exited off the coast of South Carolina. It was shot down, and they're recovering. That was a spy balloon. And we've never seen it do what that one did, but we have seen it as they've been testing it around the world and so forth. Then you have the other 3. The other 3, we don't know what they are. They don't know what they are. They haven't told anybody. They haven't told us what it is. They may not know themselves and potentially may never know. Those incidents, the 3 objects, as they've called it, are actually not unprecedented. There have been hundreds and hundreds of reports almost identical to these over the last few years. Not about flying saucers. It's about small vehicles operating in often restricted airspace. But what is unusual is that this is the first time in American history, 65 years since NORAD was set up, that we've shot anything down, not to mention 3 things over 3 days last weekend. And so I do think that merits the president directly addressing why those things were shot down and what we know up to this point. Nothing they've talked to us about with regards to those 3 should be classified, because it's really not the type of thing you classify.
Senator, based on what you know, is the United States prepared to deal with what it can now see are objects in the sky on a fairly routine basis?
I would say the answer is no. Look, if you go back, I encourage everyone, I know people don't follow this closely, but there's an agency called AARO that was created by Senator Gillibrand of New York and myself and others, and it monitors all of these anomalous incidents, which is basically aircraft flying in places they don't belong and we don't know who it belongs to. There are hundreds of these cases being reported. We don't do a good job of monitoring. We don't have a systemized way to respond to it. And the difference between these 3 and hundreds of those cases is these 3 were shot down. That's the biggest difference. So right now, if you're a small craft moving slowly, perhaps maneuvering in ways we're not used to seeing at 20, 25, 30,000 feet, the U.S. really doesn't have an established protocol for how to monitor that or address it until NORAD decided to turn on its radars and look for it at that level.
The Biden administration is still being criticized for not shooting down the balloon earlier. And their pushback to that is, listen, we wanted to make sure that it was in a safe area, that American lives weren't at stake. Do you not believe that explanation?
No, they had an opportunity to shoot it down before it entered U.S. airspace, before it even got over Alaska. They knew where it was headed. They had been tracking it. We knew well in advance, at least a day before it entered U.S. airspace. We knew where it was headed, and we had an opportunity to confront it then, and failed to do so. And now this thing, what it did is it went right through the middle of the country. And unlike other similar flights by these balloons, it didn't just go over a piece of Florida for 30 minutes on its way across the equator. This one hung over, diagonally across through the middle of the country and over places like Strategic Command, sensitive missile fields. My sense is they probably collected all sorts of signals, intelligence, and imagery that have proved valuable to the Chinese Communist Party. And so they had a chance to stop it before it did all that.
Well, how is this affecting U.S.-Chinese relations then?
And on that point, though, Gayle, there seems to be daylight between what the White House is saying, that there's been no effect, and then what the Pentagon has said, which is that Chinese counterparts would not even take a call from our defense secretary. Sounds like a pretty cool relationship. So where are things really, and where do they need to go going forward?
Well, the United States and China are engaged in great power competition. That's been the way the world has been for all but the last, 30 years, but which is an anomaly. But the world has always had great powers that compete against each other, and the hope is you can avoid that turning into a military conflict. But we will be competitors with China technologically, commercially, geopolitically, and military from a capability perspective for the rest of our lifetimes. This entire century will be defined by that competition. So, the Chinese are complaining and stuff, but they know it's their balloon.
Senator, I want to get your thoughts on a problem that seems to be uniquely American, and we're talking about mass shootings. In the recent week, we've had El Paso and also Michigan State. There have been more mass shootings than days of the year, 71 to be exact. Why do you think this is a U.S. problem?
Well, the problem is really mass murder. And guns are the instrument they use on a lot of these murders, but mass murder is really the core issue. Why do people decide I'm going to kill a bunch of people, some of whom are strangers? And that's a real fundamental challenge. There's a lot of science and study out there written about it. There are some key indicators of what leads someone to do that. I mean, they're invariably young males, oftentimes have shown signs well in advance. With the exception of the shooting in Las Vegas, every single one of these was someone who was telegraphing that they were headed in a bad direction. So the ability to intervene before they take action is really critical here.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not being dismissive to those with mental health issues. But after the shooting at Parkland High School 5 years ago, you showed willingness to support stricter gun legislation, but then voted against it, a gun reform bill this past summer. So have your stance changed on how you look at restricting gun laws?
Well, that's not an accurate description of what I voted against. What I voted against was a bill that didn't protect people's fundamental rights. I'm in favor of red flag laws. I'm not in favor of red flag laws that allow your neighbor who has a problem with you to go down to the courthouse and have your gun taken away. I think it should be law enforcement that does it, like the law is in Florida. This law provided federal funding for laws across the country that would allow a neighbor, a coworker, anyone really, to go down to a courthouse because they have a personal beef and give you a hard time about your ownership of a gun. And so I'm not in favor of a law that does that.
Right.
I am in favor of one that allows family members to go to law enforcement and say, my relative is threatening to kill themselves, they own a gun. We can't legally take it away from them unless there's a court order to do so, to protect them, perhaps others. I continue to support that. I've offered that. I've filed bills to do that are bipartisan. They just chose to go in a different direction.
Can
But
Democrats
Senator Rubio, aren't you tired of this story, too, in less than 30 seconds?
Yes.
It's clear what we have on the books right now isn't working. Aren't you tired of these stories, as we all are?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why it's not working is because we don't enforce these laws. This individual in the latest shooting actually had gun charges in the past. So that's the first point I would make. The second is that the leading cause of gun death in America after suicide is street violence, where these guns are being sold on the black market. And so the fundamental question goes back to this. Why are young people in America willing to murder people? We have people get shot every day in all parts of South Florida where I live by thugs who go out and shoot up a house. They didn't buy that at a gun show or at a gun store. They're buying it off the street, and they're killing people without any regard for human life. And that's the core issue that we're confronting.
Yeah, I just know we're all sitting here frustrated and nothing seems to change. But we thank you, Senator, for your time. I know we'll talk again. Thank you.